The 1920s. America's secret war. There was a man named Herbert Yardley, a master codebreaker, a man who understood that diplomacy was theater and that the real negotiations happened in encrypted telegrams. He ran what was called the Black Chamber, a joint operation between the State Department and the Army, quietly reading the diplomatic communications of foreign governments, particularly Japan. It was remarkably successful. During the Washington Naval Conference of 1921 to 1922, American negotiators knew exactly what the Japanese delegation's bottom line was, because Yardley's team was reading their encrypted cables in real time. America won that negotiation. Japan agreed to unfavorable naval limitations. They had no idea they'd been playing poker with their cards face up. But in 1929, the game ended. Henry Stimson, the new Secretary of State under President Hoover, was informed of the Black Chamber's existence. He was appalled, and he shut it down. His reasoning, immortalized in history: "Gentlemen do not read each other's mail." It's a beautiful sentiment, noble, principled, and catastrophically naive. The State Department may have closed the Black Chamber, but the U.S. Army disagreed with Stimson's gentlemanly philosophy. In 1930, the Army established the Signal Intelligence Service, the SIS, small, underfunded, operating in near total secrecy, and led by a man who would become a legend in the shadow world of cryptanalysis, William F. Friedman. Friedman was not a typical military officer. He wasn't even military. He was a civilian cryptographer working for the Army. His background was eccentric. He had studied genetics and plant science. He'd worked on agricultural experiments before being recruited into code breaking during World War I. But Friedman had a gift. He saw patterns where others saw chaos. He approached cryptography not as a puzzle, but as a science, a structured language with rules that could be discovered, tested, and exploited. He built the SIS from almost nothing. By the late 1930s, his team consisted of a handful of brilliant mathematicians, linguists, and analysts. They worked in cramped offices in the munitions building in Washington, D.C., hunched over intercept sheets, building charts, testing theories. And they achieved the impossible. Japan, like all nations, encrypted its most sensitive diplomatic communications. In the early 1930s, they used a cipher machine the Americans codenamed Red. It was sophisticated, a rotor-based machine that created complex substitution ciphers. The Japanese believed it was unbreakable. Friedman's team broke it. By the mid-1930s, the United States was reading Japanese diplomatic traffic almost in real time. Tokyo's communications to its embassies in Washington, London, Berlin, all of it was transparent. The Americans called this intelligence red magic. It was one of the most valuable intelligence coups in history, and almost no one knew about it. But then, the signal changed. In 1938, the SYS analysts noticed something alarming. The red traffic, the encrypted Japanese diplomatic messages they'd been reading for years, began to thin. Fewer messages, then intermittent. Then, by early 1939, it stopped entirely, and in its place appeared a new signal. The messages were similar in format, diplomatic cables, standard protocols, but the encryption was completely different. The patterns that had allowed them to break red were gone. This was something new, something far more complex. The code breakers called it purple, and they were blind again. Every attempt to apply their red-breaking techniques failed. The mathematical structures didn't match. The frequency analysis didn't work. It was as if the Japanese had rebuilt their entire cryptographic system from the ground up, which in fact they had. The timing could not have been worse. In 1936, Japan had signed the Anti-Comintern Pact with Nazi Germany. By 1940, they would join the Tripartite Pact, the Axis Alliance. Japan was becoming increasingly militaristic, aggressive, expansionist, and America had just lost its window into Japanese thinking at the exact moment when that window mattered most. The world was sliding toward war, and the United States was deaf, dumb, and blind regarding its most dangerous potential adversary in the Pacific. Friedman and his team had to break purple, not just for intelligence value, for national survival. To understand the challenge Friedman faced, you need to understand what purple was. This was not a code book. This was not a simple substitution cipher where A becomes Q and B becomes R. This was a machine cipher, an electromechanical device that generated extremely complex, constantly changing encryption. But it wasn't like Enigma. The German Enigma machine, which the British and Poles were desperately trying to break at the same time, used rotors, spinning wheels with electrical contacts. Every time you pressed a key, the rotor would advance one position, changing the substitution pattern. Purple used something entirely different: telephone stepping switches. Imagine an old telephone switchboard from the 1930s, a massive board with plugs and sockets. Now imagine it automated. A stepping switch is an electromechanical device that can connect one input to one of many outputs, and then step to connect that input to a different output the next time it's activated. The purple machine had banks of these switches. When a Japanese operator typed the letter A, the switches would connect A to, let's say, Q. But then the switches would step. The next time A was typed, it might now connect to G, then M, then T, and purple didn't use just one bank of switches. It used multiple banks, all stepping at different rates, in different patterns, interacting with each other in complex ways. The number of possible combinations was astronomical. Billions, perhaps trillions, depending on the starting positions. And the Japanese changed those starting positions, the key, regularly, sometimes daily. Here was Friedman's impossible task. He had no purple machine, no photographs of one, no defector who could describe it, no stolen schematics. All he had were the encrypted messages, the output of the machine. Just strings of seemingly random letters. From those strings alone, he had to deduce the entire internal structure, wiring, and logic of a machine he had never seen. It's like being given a sealed black box that produces strange sounds when you shake it, and being asked to build a perfect working replica based solely on those sounds, without ever opening the box, without ever seeing what's inside. Cryptanalysts call this breaking a cipher in depth. It's the hardest form of code breaking, and it's exactly what Friedman had to do, and he had to do it fast. Because every day purple remained unbroken was another day America operated in the dark. For 20 months, from early 1939 to September 1940, Friedman and his small team worked on purple. 20 months. They worked 7 days a week, 12, 14, 16 hours a day, hunched over intercept sheets covered in Japanese kana characters and their romanized equivalents, building massive frequency distribution charts, testing hypotheses, finding patterns that led nowhere. The work was intellectually brutal. It wasn't like solving a crossword puzzle where you get small wins along the way. This was staring at chaos and trying to find the hidden structure. For months, with no progress, no breakthroughs, just endless, grinding, mind-numbing analysis. And the pressure from Washington was immense. Military intelligence wanted answers. What are the Japanese planning? Are they going to attack American interests in the Pacific? Are they coordinating with Germany? What does Tokyo know about American military preparations? And Friedman had no answers because he couldn't read purple. The team was on the edge of despair. Some wondered if purple was actually unbreakable, if the Japanese had finally created a cipher that no human mind could defeat. Friedman didn't accept that. He couldn't. But the weight of the problem was crushing him. The first break came not from mathematical genius, but from human nature. Diplomats are formal. They follow protocol, and Japanese diplomatic cables, like all diplomatic correspondence, began with standard formulaic greetings. I have the honor to inform Your Excellency with reference to your esteemed communication. This is what cryptanalysts call a crib, a known or suspected piece of plain text. If you know what a message says, or even part of what it says, you can work backward to figure out how the cipher is transforming letters. The problem was that purple was so complex, even having a crib didn't immediately reveal the mechanism. But it gave Friedman's team something to test against: a toehold. They could take that standard opening phrase, known in Japanese, and compare it to the encrypted version. They could see which letters were being substituted for which. And if they collected enough of these comparisons across multiple messages, patterns might emerge. Slowly, agonizingly, patterns did emerge. Friedman had been staring at frequency distributions for months. In any language, certain letters appear more often than others. In English, E is the most common letter, followed by T, A, O. In Japanese romanization, the vowels dominate. He noticed something strange in purple's output. The cipher wasn't treating all 26 letters of the alphabet the same way. There was a statistical split, a division. Some letters were behaving differently from others in ways that shouldn't be possible in a conventional rota cipher. And then, Friedman had his insight, his impossible solution. The purple machine was not encrypting all letters through the same mechanism. It was splitting the alphabet. It took the 6 vowels, A, E, I, O, U, Y, and processed them through one set of switches. And it took the 20 consonants, B, C, D, F, G, H, and so on, and processed them through a completely different set of switches. 2 separate ciphers running in parallel. One machine, but functionally 2 systems. Friedman called them the 6s and the 20s. This was the breakthrough. The problem that had seemed monolithically unsolvable was now 2 smaller problems. Still difficult, still complex, but solvable. The 6's cipher was simpler. Only 6 letters cycling through a limited number of switch positions. It could be attacked with frequency analysis and pattern recognition. The 20s cipher was more complex, but once the 6's were understood, the 20s could be approached systematically. Friedman had found the crack in the wall, but this discovery, this impossible solution that would crack purple, came at a terrible price. 20 months of constant stress, the weight of national security resting on his shoulders, the sheer mental force required to hold this immensely complex problem in his head, day after day, week after week, with no respite. It broke William Friedman. In late 1940, just as the breakthrough was forming, Friedman suffered a complete nervous breakdown. The father of American cryptanalysis, the man who had built the SYS from nothing, who had broken red and was on the verge of breaking purple, he collapsed. He was admitted to Walter Reed Army Hospital. Severe depression, exhaustion. His doctors weren't sure if he would recover, weren't sure if he would ever be able to work again. The architect of the impossible solution was out of the war, and purple was still unbroken. The work fell to Friedman's team. particularly to one man, Frank Rowlett. Rowlett was younger than Friedman, but he'd been with the SIS from almost the beginning. He was one of Friedman's first hires, one of the original puzzle solvers recruited in the early 1930s, a mathematician, a brilliant analyst, and someone Friedman trusted completely. Rowlett took Friedman's 6s and 20s insight and ran with it. The team focused on the 6's cipher first. 6 letters, manageable. They built charts tracking how each vowel was being substituted across hundreds of intercepted messages. They looked for cycles, patterns, repeats, and slowly, the 6's mechanism began to reveal itself. They could deduce how many stepping switches were involved, how they were connected, how they advanced. By mid-1940, the 6's cipher was effectively broken. They could decrypt the vowels in purple messages. Now came the 20s. 20 consonants, a far more complex system, but using the same underlying logic. Stepping switches, just more of them, in more elaborate configurations. Rowlett and his team worked through the summer of 1940. The work was still grueling, still frustrating, but now they had hope. Friedman's insight had given them a roadmap. September 20th, 1940. A date that should be remembered in American history, but isn't. Frank Rowlett made the final logical leap. He deduced the wiring of the 20's stepping switches, not by seeing them, he still had never seen a purple machine, but by pure analysis, by understanding the mathematical relationships embedded in the ciphertext. Now came the ultimate test. The team, working in a secure vault in the munitions building, began to build their own purple machine. A purple analog. It was a monster. A framework of metal covered with hundreds of wires, banks of stepping switches salvaged from telephone equipment, relay switches, and a teletype printer. They wired it according to their deductions. Every connection, every switch position, if their analysis was correct, if Friedman and Rowlett had truly understood the machine's logic. This analog would function identically to the original Japanese machine. If they were wrong, it would produce gibberish. They fed in an intercepted purple message, a long diplomatic cable from Tokyo to the Japanese embassy in Washington. They set the switches to what they believed was the starting key for that message. Rowlett pressed the start button. The stepping switches clicked, the relays clattered, the teletype machine came to life, and it printed out nonsense. Random letters, not Japanese, not anything. Hearts sank. 20 months of work. Had they gotten it wrong? They checked the wiring, rechecked their calculations. A young lieutenant, Leo Rosen, one of the engineers who'd built the physical machine, noticed something. 2 wires, connected to the wrong terminals, a simple mistake in the construction. He swapped them. They ran the message through again. The teletype clattered to life, and this time it printed out perfect, clear, readable Japanese. The room erupted, cheering, shouting. Men who'd been on the edge of despair for nearly 2 years were weeping with relief and joy. They had done the impossible. They had broken purple. They had built a working replica of a machine they had never seen. They called the intelligence derived from purple magic. And it was magical. Suddenly, America was a silent, invisible third participant in every encrypted conversation between Tokyo and its embassies around the world. The Japanese ambassador to Germany, General Hiroshi Oshima, sent detailed reports to Tokyo about his meetings with Hitler, about German military plans, about the state of the Wehrmacht. He was extraordinarily well informed and thorough. The Americans read every word. President Roosevelt shared this intelligence with Winston Churchill. The Allies had a direct window into Hitler's strategic thinking, courtesy of a Japanese diplomat and a broken cipher. The Japanese embassy in Washington, conducting negotiations with the State Department, sent encrypted reports back to Tokyo describing American positions, weaknesses, and diplomatic strategy. The Americans read every word. They knew exactly what the Japanese truly thought, what they wanted, what their bottom line was. Behind the polite diplomatic facades, the US knew the truth. Magic was one of the most valuable intelligence sources of World War II. It shaped strategy. It saved lives. It gave the United States a decisive advantage in the Pacific War. But it didn't prevent Pearl Harbor. Why didn't magic prevent Pearl Harbor? It's a question that still haunts historians. Magic did intercept critical signals. In the weeks leading up to December 7th, 1941, the traffic from Tokyo to Washington became increasingly ominous. Negotiations were stalling. Deadlines were being set. On December 6th, the day before the attack, magic intercepted the famous 14-part message from Tokyo to the Japanese embassy in Washington. It was a long diplomatic note formally breaking off negotiations. Not quite a declaration of war, but close. A clear signal that diplomacy was over. That same night, magic intercepted another message. Orders to the Washington embassy to destroy their code machines immediately. This was unambiguous. You only destroy code machines when you're about to go to war. These intercepts were in Washington by the evening of December 6th. The codebreakers worked through the night, translating and typing up summaries for distribution to military leadership. But here's the tragedy. Purple was a diplomatic cipher. It carried diplomatic traffic. It didn't carry military operational orders. The Japanese Navy used a completely different cipher system, JN-25. And that system, while partially broken, was not being read reliably in December 1941. So magic told the Americans that war was imminent. But it didn't say where the Japanese would strike. It didn't say Pearl Harbor, 7:55 a.m., December 7th. The failure to prevent Pearl Harbor was not a failure of cryptanalysis. It was a failure of analysis. The intelligence community saw the signals, but they didn't connect the dots. They didn't interpret the urgency correctly. They didn't understand that destroy your code machines meant war is hours away, not days or weeks. And there were bureaucratic failures. The warning messages that were sent out on the morning of December 7th were delayed, garbled, not clear enough, not fast enough. By the time commanders in Hawaii understood that war was imminent, Japanese aircraft were already in the air. William Friedman, still recovering in Walter Reed Hospital, heard the news of Pearl Harbor on the radio. He wept, not just for the lives lost, but for the knowledge that his team's incredible achievement, breaking purple, hadn't been enough. He eventually returned to work. He would continue to contribute to American cryptanalysis throughout the war and beyond. But he was never quite the same. The breakdown, the weight of Pearl Harbor, left scars that never fully healed. But his legacy is undeniable. The impossible solution, the insight that purple was splitting the alphabet into 6s and 20s, was one of the greatest intellectual achievements in the history of cryptanalysis. Building a working replica of a machine you've never seen, based solely on analyzing its output, remains one of the most extraordinary feats of reverse engineering ever accomplished. And magic, the intelligence it provided, was decisive. It shaped American strategy throughout the Pacific War. It saved countless lives. It helped win the war. Friedman had won the intellectual battle. He had proven that no cipher, no matter how complex, was truly unbreakable if the human mind was clever enough, patient enough, and determined enough. But he had also learned the tragic lesson that knowing your enemy's secrets and understanding what those secrets mean, understanding them in time to act, are two very different things. The mind that broke Japan's unbreakable code had given his country a weapon. But weapons, even the most powerful, are only as effective as the people who wield them.